The Sixth Floor. Chapter 1. The Cleaner. I took the night cleaning job because I was behind on rent and too embarrassed to ask my brother for money again. The building was called Harrow House, an old office block on the edge of the city, half empty since most of the companies moved out. My shift started after the last receptionist left. The agency said floors 5 through 7 were unused and not part of my route. On my first night, while mopping the third-floor corridor, I heard a phone ringing somewhere above me. I remember standing there with my hands tight around the mop handle, listening for any ordinary explanation. There was none. The whole corridor seemed to hold its breath around me, as if the building had noticed someone new had entered after dark. I told myself I would finish one more corridor, then leave. I tried ignoring it. Old buildings make noises. Phones glitch. That was what I told myself while wiping fingerprints from glass doors nobody should have touched. The ringing stopped, then started again directly above the stairwell. It sounded like one of those old desk phones, sharp and impatient. I radioed security downstairs. No answer. When I checked the logbook, the guard had signed out 2 hours early, leaving a note I hadn't noticed before. If the upper floors call, don't pick up. The note looked rushed, written hard enough to tear the paper. I kept staring at it, waiting for the words to become less threatening. They didn't. Behind me, the elevator cables groaned above the shaft, like something shifting its weight. That was the first moment I understood. The warning was meant for me. At midnight, the elevator opened by itself. The display showed floor 6, even though the lift was sitting in front of me. Inside, someone had placed a single paper cup on the floor, still steaming. Written on the side in black marker was my name. I stepped back before the doors closed. As the lift rose, the phone above me began ringing again. This time, underneath the ring, I heard someone breathing through the handset. For a few seconds, I could not move. The steam from the cup curled upward in the cold lobby, impossible and ordinary at the same time. That made it worse. Whatever had left it there wanted me to know it understood small human details. Above me, something clicked twice, like a receiver being lifted. So Chapter 2. Floor 6. I didn't go upstairs that night. I finished my shift too fast and drove home with every interior light in my car on. The next afternoon, I almost quit, but the agency reminded me there was a penalty for walking out mid-contract. So I returned. The security guard was different, older, pale. He told me the previous guard was sick, then avoided looking at the elevator. When I asked about floor 6, he said, "That floor was cleared after the Meridian audit." He wouldn't explain what that meant. The drive back felt wrong, too. Every traffic light seemed to last too long, and in my rear-view mirror, I kept seeing the dark shape of the building behind me even after I was miles away. By the time I reached home, my uniform smelled faintly of smoke. That night, I found a desk phone sitting in the middle of the third-floor kitchen. It hadn't been there earlier. The cord trailed behind the fridge and disappeared into a crack in the wall. I stood there staring at it until it rang. One short burst, then another. I should have walked away, but fear can make you curious in the stupidest ways. I lifted the receiver. A woman's voice whispered, "Daniel, don't let them clock you out." The woman's voice wasn't loud, but it carried the tired patience of someone who had been waiting a long time. I could hear static under her words, like she was speaking from somewhere deep inside the walls. When I hung up, the dial tone continued from inside the wall. The voice knew my name. It also knew my schedule, my address, and that I hadn't told anyone about the job. I dropped the phone and ran to the stairwell. Before I reached it, every light on the floor went out except the exit sign. In that red glow, I saw wet footprints appearing one by one across the carpet. They came from the elevator and stopped outside the kitchen, pointing toward me. I held my breath until my chest hurt. The footprints were not shaped like normal shoes. They were too narrow, too long, and each one darkened the carpet as if whatever made them had come up from underground water. The footprints stopped exactly where my own feet started. Chapter 3. The Audit Room. The old guard stopped me before I left. He was waiting beside the lobby doors, coat on, keys in his fist. "If you heard a woman," he said, "you need to report it." I thought he meant to the agency. He shook his head and handed me an access card with no name printed on it. "To them," he said. "5th floor, conference room B." Then he walked out into the rain and didn't look back. The access card felt warm in my palm. I asked Harris what would happen if I refused. He only looked at the ceiling where the ringing had stopped all at once and said, "Then they come down to you." I wanted to refuse, but my name appeared on the elevator display. Conference room B looked normal at first. Long table, stacked chairs, a dusty projector screen. But the far wall was covered with employee ID photos, hundreds of them. Some were yellowed with age, others looked recent. Every face had a red line drawn through it. I found the old guard's photo near the bottom. Then I found mine, freshly printed, still warm from the laminator. The photos were arranged too neatly to be vandalism. Whoever had made that wall had treated it like office administration. Names, faces, dates, red lines, not murder, paperwork. The laminator beside the wall was still humming softly. A printer in the corner started by itself. One page slid out, then another. Each showed a security still from somewhere in the building. Me entering the lobby, me mopping the corridor, me holding the phone. The final image hadn't happened yet. It showed me standing on floor 6, outside a glass office door, with someone behind me wearing my cleaning uniform. I stared at the future photograph until my eyes watered. The figure behind me was slightly blurred, but the uniform was unmistakable. It stood close enough that its chin almost touched my shoulder. The future version of me looked calmer than I had ever been. Chapter 4. Meridian. I searched Meridian on the office computer. Most results were archived business pages, but one cached article mentioned a financial services firm that occupied Harrow House 12 years earlier. During an overnight audit, 6 employees were reported missing. The company claimed they resigned after fraud accusations. Their families claimed they never came home. The article ended with one detail that made my skin tighten. The audit took place on floor 6. The article had only been saved by accident on an old local archive. Comments underneath were disabled, but one cached line remained visible. "My sister worked there. That wasn't her who came home." I copied the article link, but it vanished before I saved it. The woman's voice returned through the computer speakers. "We didn't resign." Her voice was calm, almost bored, which made it worse. The screen filled with file names I hadn't clicked. Exit_interviews, final_clockout, replacements. I tried shutting the computer down, but the mouse moved by itself. It opened a video file. 6 people sat in a conference room, silent and terrified, while someone off camera asked each of them to state their name for the record. The video had no timestamp and no company logo, only the soft hum of fluorescent lights. The 6 employees sat with their hands folded on the table, all of them avoiding the empty chair at the end. One woman kept blinking in the video, fighting not to cry. The video froze on the last woman. She stared toward the camera like she could see through time. Her lips moved before the audio caught up. "If you're watching this, they already have your face." Then the lights in the office brightened all at once. Every computer monitor on the floor switched on, each showing my reflection from a different angle. None of the reflections were moving when I moved. I waved at one monitor. My reflection did not wave back. It stood there with my face and my posture. watching me like it was trying to decide how much of me it still needed. Then one monitor smiled a second before my mouth did. Chapter 5. Clocked in. My access card stopped working at the lobby doors. The building had locked me inside. I called emergency services, but the line connected to an internal extension. A man answered in my voice. "Cleaning department," he said. "How can I help?" I smashed the phone against the desk until the plastic cracked. From somewhere upstairs, dozens of phones started ringing at once, overlapping into one steady mechanical scream. The panic should have made me scream, but I went strangely quiet. I think part of me already understood that making noise in Harrow House only gave it more to use. The locked doors rattled gently as if something tested each handle. I ran to the fire exit and pushed through into the stairwell. The concrete steps spiraled upward and downward farther than the building should have allowed. Floor numbers were painted on every landing, but after 4 they stopped making sense. 5, 5A, 5B, 6, 6, 6 again. On one landing, I found a row of shoes neatly placed against the wall, all polished, all filled with gray dust. Each landing looked slightly older than the one before. Paint peeled in strips. Old cigarette ends lay in corners. It felt like I was walking through different years of the same building. The dust in the shoes looked almost like ash. The stairwell speaker crackled. A calm corporate voice announced, "Final audit commencing." Then all the doors clicked open at once. Behind each door was not a floor, but the same conference room, repeated over and over. Same long table, same empty chairs, same ID photos on the wall. In the closest room, a chair had been pulled out for me. The repeated conference rooms were not perfect copies. In each one detail changed. A chair turned toward me, a folder opened. A phone lifted slightly off its cradle by itself. The chair closest to me scraped backwards an inch by itself. Harris said the copies left through the front door wearing the originals' faces. They went home, answered emails, paid bills, slept beside spouses, and nobody noticed until small things changed. The originals remained in Harrow House, clocked in forever. "It doesn't kill you first," Harris whispered. "It makes sure no one misses you." Then something above us laughed, using my voice. I asked why he never left. He laughed once without humor and said he had tried. Every time he reached home, another Harris was already there, living quietly with his wife. I didn't ask what happened to his wife after that. Chapter 6. Replacements. Scene 1. I found the old guard on a landing that shouldn't have existed. He was sitting with his back against the wall, breathing hard. His name was Harris. He told me he once worked for Meridian as night security. The missing employees weren't fired, he said. They were copied. Meridian had built something into the building's internal phone system, something meant to record behavior, voice, habits, signatures. It learned people too well. Harris looked like a man who had survived by becoming invisible. His uniform was too large, his eyes bloodshot, and his hands shook whenever the phones rang above us. He kept checking his watch, though the face was cracked and blank. We climbed until we reached floor 6. The chained door to Meridian's old office stood open. The air inside was colder than the stairwell and smelled faintly of warm photocopier toner. Rows of empty desks stretched into darkness. At the far end, someone in my uniform stood beside a desk phone, back turned, shoulders rising and falling as if practicing how to breathe. The figure at the desk tilted its head as if listening to instructions nobody else could hear. Then it straightened its shoulders, copied my nervous breathing, and became more convincing with every second. Harris crossed himself, then pretended he hadn't. Chapter 7. My voice. Harris pulled me back before I could speak. The figure in my uniform turned anyway. It had my face, but not perfectly. The smile arrived too late. The eyes focused a second after the head moved. It lifted one hand in a small, embarrassed wave, like it had been caught doing something private. Then every phone on the 6th floor rang together, and the duplicate answered all of them in my voice. The wave was what frightened me most, not the face, not the voice. The awkward little gesture felt rehearsed, like something had watched people greet each other and misunderstood why they did it. It raised its hand again, waiting for me to return the gesture. The duplicate spoke into the receivers without touching most of them. It repeated details from my life, my brother's address, my mother's birthday, the password hint on my banking app, things I had never said out loud inside that building. Harris whispered that once it had enough, the doors would open for the copy, but not for me. I backed away, and the duplicate copied the movement exactly, still smiling. Harris gripped my sleeve hard enough to hurt. He kept whispering, "Don't answer. Whatever it asks, don't answer." But the duplicate was already saying my name in the exact tone I used when talking to myself. The phones repeated my private thoughts in soft, overlapping whispers. We ran. Behind us, my own voice shouted from the office, angry now, commanding the building to lock down. Metal shutters slammed over windows, fire doors banged shut below. Harris shoved a key into my hand and pointed toward the records room. "Burn the files," he said. "If it loses your pattern, it can't leave as you." Then he turned back toward the 6th floor as something wearing my footsteps approached. I could hear shutters slamming floor by floor beneath us. Harrow House was sealing itself from the street, from the city, from anyone who might come looking if I disappeared. My key felt colder the closer I got to the records room. Chapter 8. Records. The records room was hidden behind a keypad door near payroll. Inside were cabinets packed floor to ceiling with files, tapes, badges, and handwritten observation logs. I found folders for every missing tenant, guard, cleaner, and temp worker who had entered Harrow House after hours. Mine was on the front desk, already thick, already labeled active replacement. The observation logs were worse than the photographs. They described my habits in plain office language. Subject avoids conflict, subject lies when afraid, subject apologizes unnecessarily. It knew me like a file. At the bottom of my file, someone had stamped approved. My file contained photographs from places the building should never have seen. Me eating breakfast in my flat. Me arguing with my brother outside a pub. Me asleep in my car before I ever took the job. The final page was a resignation letter in my handwriting. It thanked the agency for the opportunity and stated I was moving away immediately. At the bottom was my signature, almost perfect. The resignation letter nearly broke me. It sounded like me on my best behavior, polite, embarrassed, careful not to inconvenience anyone. It was exactly the kind of lie people would believe. The signature at the bottom made my hand ache when I saw it. I set the files on fire in a metal bin. Smoke rolled toward the ceiling alarms, but none sounded. Instead, the office phones began screaming, not ringing. Human voices burst from every receiver. Some begged, some threatened, some sounded relieved. As the flames climbed higher, I heard Harris cry out somewhere beyond the door, followed by my own voice calmly telling him to clock out. As the files burned, faces appeared briefly in the smoke. Not clear enough to recognize, but human enough to make me step back. One voice whispered thank you before being swallowed by the flames. The fire made the room feel alive in a different way. Chapter 9. Final Audit. When I opened the records room door, the hallway had changed. Cubicles lined both sides, but the walls were covered with glass, and behind the glass stood the missing people. Their faces were pale and pressed close, mouths moving silently. Eric from the audit video pointed behind me. I turned and saw the duplicate at the far end of the hall, burning at the edges, still walking toward me. The trapped workers beat silently against the glass as I passed. Their eyes followed me with desperate recognition. They weren't asking me to save them anymore. They were warning me not to become them. A child's handprint appeared briefly on the inside of the glass. It was learning pain now. I could see it adjusting, forcing my expression back into place each time the flames damaged its face. "You don't want your life," it said in my voice. "You were throwing it away." The worst part was that it sounded sincere. It knew enough about me to choose the cruelest truth. For a second, I almost stopped running. That sentence hit harder than any threat. The thing had found the shame I carried and wore it like a weapon. It sounded less like a monster and more like the cruelest part of my own mind. The duplicate knew where to hurt me because I had taught it. The lobby doors were open when I reached them. Outside, dawn light reflected off wet pavement. Harris stood beside the security desk, or what was left of him. His face looked half erased like a bad photocopy. He held the duplicate back with both arms and screamed for me to leave. I ran into the rain while my own voice begged me not to abandon myself. Harris did not look afraid at the end. He looked relieved. As I pushed through the doors, I heard the duplicate begin to sob in my voice, and for one terrible second, I wanted to turn back. The rain outside felt like the first real thing in hours. Chapter 10. The new hire police found no fire damage inside Harrow House, no records room, no Meridian office, no evidence of anyone named Harris working security there. The agency claimed I had missed 3 shifts and terminated my contract. I tried showing them my burned sleeve and the key Harris gave me, but the key was blank by then, smooth on both sides like it had never opened anything. The officers were kind at first, then careful, then distant. I recognized the change. It was the look people give when they decide your story belongs in a hospital, not a police report. They wrote it down as stress-induced confusion and sent me home. For weeks, I waited for my life to fracture. I changed passwords, replaced my phone, stayed with my brother, and avoided every office building after sunset. Nothing happened. Eventually, people stopped asking questions. They wanted the simple version: stress, lack of sleep, breakdown. I let them have it because I wanted it too. Then, one morning, I received an email from myself. The email arrived from an address I had deleted. Seeing my own name in the sender field made my stomach drop harder than anything in Harrow House. Some part of it had made it out. My brother thought it was spam until he saw my face. The subject line said, "First day went well." There was one attachment. A photo taken from behind a reception desk showed a smiling man in a navy cleaning polo signing into a different office building. He had my face. Almost. In the background, reflected in the glass doors, stood Harris, pale and blurred, holding up one finger to his lips. I never opened the attachment again after that first time. I didn't need to. I had already seen enough. The duplicate's smile was better now, almost natural, almost mine. Sometimes I still hear office phones ringing in other buildings. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more chilling tales.